most of you guys, I think, know by now what AirStrip is and what AirStrip does. And I'm about to introduce Alan Portela, who is the CEO. He's been around in this business for quite a while, kind of 25 years in the medtech business, which is getting on there. He may be one of the few who's as old as me in the whole place, which is pretty worrying. And, you know, what they really do here is they offer sort of vendor and data source agnostic mobility solutions for clinicians primarily. But the really exciting news, and you'll notice that Alan is so keen to be vendor agnostic, he's taken off the Allscripts sponsored lanyard and using the one from what happened yesterday, where the folks at IBM shockingly had a rival conference to ours in San Francisco. I will have to have words with my IBM friends about that, even though they were on the stage here this morning. And at that conference, they introduced a bunch of new stuff around Watson, including some really interesting stuff around the power of new analytics. And AirStrip is are you the first guys in healthcare doing this? Very early on, it's probably the first people in mobile healthcare to be doing what you're about to do. So Alan is going to show you some really interesting stuff. It's going to be a really fun time, and looking forward to it. So please welcome Alan.
Thank you. So we are actually the only ones, not the first ones. So I just want to explain this. As Matthew said, we want to be agnostic, and I didn't want to have an EMR vendor around my neck. I'm afraid they will choke me. So we usually, as a platform, we like to sit on top of EMR vendors, but we don't like to have them around our neck. So in any case, so since I know that this is towards the end of the conference, I will try to make this very fluid. There is a lot of light on my face, so I don't know how crowded the room is, but I will pretend it's very full. So thank you for coming, all of you. So in any case, so I will tell you a little bit about the evolution of our company, how we got to where we are today. A lot of people are telling us that we are the leaders on mHealth. We are driving innovation in mHealth. And I think it's important to share a little bit the story and why we are doing what we're doing moving forward, and the announcements that we are making yesterday at TED IBM and today at 2.0. So we all know the issues that we know that as part of Affordable Care Act, now we see that there are many patients that are coming into the systems. We have few doctors who take care of those patients. We know that we're starting to see, of course, reimbursement rates going down, patients coming in at a cost much higher than the reimbursement rate. So those patients are coming in at a cost that are going to force healthcare organizations to cut their operating budgets by 35% over the next 3 to 4 years. And of course, they're only going to concentrate on innovation around improvement of outcomes. So that's what we're going to discuss today. So as we see these trends, this is very much the way the systems are looking like today. Basically, you see not only consolidation, where hospitals are buying more hospitals, post-acute care facilities, community-based care, but also what is happening is you're starting to see collaboration between organizations around specific markets, different states, different regions. But what happens is that as you're cutting down the operating budgets, you don't have the opportunity to replace all your legacy systems and standardize on one. So what happens then is you end up having Epic, Cerner, McKesson, Allscripts, Meditech on the EMR. On the EHR side, again, Epic, but then now you have Athena Healthcare, eClinicalWorks, NextGen, many systems that are only communicating to each other at a very limited level using standards like CCDA and HL7. But also you have now a number of medical devices from Philips, Siemens, Space Labs, systems that are definitely not talking to each other. So if you start mobilizing that mess that you see there, all what you're doing is really propagating the mess to a mobile device, but you're really not solving the challenge of front-end integration and improving care coordination. So I tell you a little bit about how we got here. And I promise I will just, hopefully everybody knows us by now, so I will go very quick on this. But We started a while ago, almost about 10 years ago, and everything started mobilizing fetal monitors, monitoring fetal heart rate and also maternal contractions. So today, 1 out of every 6 babies in the US are monitored by, the moms are monitored during labor by doctors using AirStrip. So we have a very strong penetration in the US market. We have about 40,000 doctors, 35,000 to 40,000 doctors using the products every day. And we were one of the first applications to be FDA clear. So what that means is that now the device that you're using, that application on that device running natively, and by that I mean iOS, Android, Windows, or even RIM. Out of the 40,000 users, we still have 2 RIM users, BlackBerry. So anyway, so we were one of the first applications to be FDA cleared, and also we received a patent for mobilizing, re-rendering medical devices on mobile devices natively. So about 4 years ago, we also introduced a cardiology module, the ability to connect to EKGs remotely. So this is when we started going outside of the 4 walls of the hospital, started monitoring patients coming in ambulances. All of a sudden, a patient that is coming with chest pain, now the doctors in the emergency department, the cardiologists, they can look at this information with diagnostic quality real time, and they can make a decision if this patient has a full blockage of the artery and if they need to go to the cath lab immediately to be able to clear that artery. So we're making a significant impact on the time, accelerating the time to intervention that is having a significant impact on, of course, clinical ROI, financial ROI by reducing the false activation of cath labs, reducing the length of stay in the ICU, but overall improving the quality of life for that patient, that as they go home, they don't have as much damage as a STEMI or a full blockage of the artery will cause if you intervene 100 minutes after you had the heart attack. The standard in the country for a clearing of the artery for a patient with a full blockage is about 90 minutes from a door to balloon time. That means emergency department to the cath lab. In some cases, we have cut 30 minutes from doing 30 minutes from the event to the cath lab, which event means at the time the ambulance picks you up. So as you can see, we started dealing with a lot of proprietary medical devices, mobilizing that information on a real-time basis, and being able to bring a lot of contextual information to be able to provide better decision support and improve outcomes. As we started evolving as a company, if you look at the last 3 years ago, we decided that we needed to go beyond just medical device mobility. We were actually dematerializing the data sources. We created a front-end integration that really helped bring in all these different devices with one single view so the doctors could follow the patients throughout the entire enterprise without really having to worry so much about what is the data source, what is the source system. This is huge because as you don't have a big budget to replace everything, you need to be able to leverage from your existing infrastructure instead of ripping and replacing. So we started connecting to EMR data, Cerner, Epic, McKesson. We started bringing third-party imaging systems, video, secure messaging, all on one platform, one application throughout the continuum of care. So the next slide basically describes what are those areas. We're doing multiple devices. Not only we run natively on iOS, Android, but now we also run on Windows, Windows 8, Windows 9, soon to be. And we have the ability to support multiple devices. So when we talk about BYOD, it's really any device. It's a laptop, a desktop, using the same look and feel of Windows Touch. So basically, we're covering all the different environments, all the different care settings. And we're doing all that based on, as I mentioned, one platform that allows you to collect multiple devices, data types, support multiple vendors, but of course, supporting multiple care settings on acute, post-acute, and community-based care. So very much, this is the way the system looks like. You can configure as many clinical tiles as you need depending on the workflow for each caregiver, each physician. But what you're looking at there is you're bringing demographics data, you're bringing allergies, also from the EMR systems, you're bringing information on labs from the ancillary systems, radiology interpretations, you're bringing the real-time streaming of patient monitoring, EKGs, you're looking at images, but also there is another tile there that deals with home health. So this is the area that we are moving into. It's not the announcement today because we have been doing this already, but starting to connect to body sensors for clinical specific conditions. So we know that everybody has an activity monitor, a blood pressure cuff, a scale, but what we're doing at AirStrip is really relying on the FDA clearance and the IP protection that we have to really go deep into each clinical condition and chronic disease. And we monitor high-risk pregnancies now outside of the home. We monitor CHF patients with patches that will do EKGs. And now we're also moving into glucose monitoring. It seems that everybody is going in that direction. All what we're doing is mobilizing those sensors that already exist. Some of our customers, we have about 500 customers, 350 live, about 200 already on schedule for contracts, for deployment. And also, we, as I mentioned, we cover 35,000 plus doctors. So now, what is that we are announcing at this conference? And I wanted to mention that after I'm done, I'm bringing a physician from the University of Michigan that heads innovation and research. And he's going to talk about what they're doing at Michigan and how IBM Michigan and AirStrip are working together on this new announcement. So basically, if you look at the data warehouses today, most of them get updated every 12 hours, 24 hours, some cases every 6 hours. But the reality is when you're applying analytics tools on top of that data warehouse, what you're really doing is retrospective analytics. You are not doing descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive analytics. You're not really doing anything that is real time. And if we are starting to monitor patients outside of the four walls of the hospital, we need to make sure that we come up with a different way of monitoring that data on a real-time basis so we can be proactive versus then reactive when we're taking care of those patients. So we call it high-velocity real-time analytics. So the next slide is going to be a little bit busy and crazy, but I like the slide, so I had to insert it. But it gives you very much the evolution of the product. The first 5 blocks are really talking about all the things that I described on medical device mobility, EKGs, obstetrics, patient monitoring, but then how we use the platform now to go vertically into each clinical condition and how we start doing telemedicine around aggregating all the data and visualizing that data at a number of medical centers. Also, what we're doing right now, as I mentioned, we're starting to partner with companies that do body sensors so we can monitor patients as they get discharged from the hospital, but also we're starting to bring algorithms. So now we can take that data and really provide the right level to look at who is out there in the population that needs immediate attention. And the specific project that we are mentioning today is a partnership with IBM and Michigan, where we are taking the ability that AirStrip has today of aggregating data from multiple systems, structure, unstructured, and streaming data, and be able to map that to clinical nomenclature and be able to feed an analytics engine. The first consumer of that data is going to be IBM, and it's not the famous Watson analytics system that is going to be the first consumer, but it's a product that is called InfoSphere Streams. And this is a product that was developed for the last 12 years between the government and IBM. And it's really designed to listen to all your phone calls, to monitor your text, to be able to read all your emails, monitor the emails, and to be able to bring visual facial recognition from videos in large metropolitan areas for early detection of terrorist threats. So this is something that is a very strong engine. It's a real-time processing engine of data in motion, not data stored on data warehouses. And we are actually taking that into healthcare. And now figure out how is that we can take all the streaming data that we get from an ICU, and also as we move into home monitoring, how can we monitor hundreds of thousands of patients that have diabetes, that have right now a patch with continuous glucose monitoring with information going in the cloud, data that eventually is not stored anywhere, but data that needs to be analyzed. So we are taking that tool on top of the analytics, and then we're visualizing the results of those engines using AirStrip mobility. So some of the projects, in order to do this, what we decided to do at AirStrip, once we already had the platform and we already had the visualization of all the data, we decided to look at innovation through partners. And the partners are the healthcare organizations. We partner with Dignity Healthcare to start now repurposing the platform to be able to support telemedicine. We're looking at tele-ICU, we're looking at telestroke, and in essence, it's really aggregating all the data to be able to virtualize all their environments so they can actually practice medicine throughout multiple regions using telemedicine. We partner with MedStar Healthcare, which is where Georgetown University is, University Medical Center, and we are taking algorithms from them to be able to faster diagnose myocardial infarction for patients that are coming in the ambulance. And I'm going to show you some of those examples. Well, that's AirStrip, Dignity. And this is what we're doing with MedStar. The ability now to look at an EKG and provide interpretation on that EKG and display the different, displays all the EKGs divided in a way where now you can look at different walls of the heart and determine where the damage is and be able to show that. We're actually going through FDA clearance for this, and we're expecting to have it by Q1 of next year. Now, the project that we're doing with IBM and University of Michigan, it's really what we were discussing before. It's the ability now to analyze data that is not yet stored. As we bring millions of patients that need to be monitored, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to keep storing data on data warehouses. We need to start observing data and be able to take action with data in motion. So if you look at what we were discussing before, if you look at the traditional data warehouses and the traditional analytics engines, they're really working on data that is retrospective. It is not real time. So what we are bringing now is the ability to do descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive analytics. So in essence, and this is my last slide before I bring Dr. Kevin Ward, in essence what you're looking at here is an environment where, and I like busy slides, where you have all that data that is aggregated and where you can actually start bringing the real-time analytics support on top of the data and to be able to provide clinical transformation. And of course, University of Michigan is going to be the first consumer of that data. And I would like Dr. Kevin Ward to come in from Michigan and tell us a little bit about this story.
Okay, well, thanks for having me. Always a hard act to follow, Mr. Portela. So I'm Kevin Ward. I'm a simple country ER doc from the University of Michigan that has the pleasure of helping direct a couple of new initiatives at Michigan. I'm going to kind of put a face on the problem that Alan talked about. And if I asked everyone here, what do you know about cancer? People would probably raise their hand and say they have a pretty good idea about cancer, that there are lots of different types of cancer. There are men cancers like prostate cancer, women cancers like breast cancer, there are childhood cancers, there are adult cancers. And those cancers have a lot in common with each other, and we've treated cancer in cancer centers, so everyone's heard about cancer centers. If I ask you what critical care is or what critical illness and injury is, you might have a little harder of a time telling me what that is. So I just want to spend a couple of minutes just talking about the face of critical care. So critical care is that background noise that runs in hospitals all the time. And about 40 to 50% of all hospital costs can be attributed to the care of the critically ill and injured. And who are the critically ill and injured? Well, they're the trauma victims. So trauma is the leading cause of death, ages 1 to 45. They're septic patients. These are patients who get overwhelming infections, 1 million cases a year with 250,000 deaths a year. So when you hear someone died of a pneumonia, they didn't die of pneumonia, they died of sepsis. Lots of traumatic brain injury, spinal cord injury, acute respiratory failures, 500,000 premature births a year. That's the leading cause of infant mortality. So when you look at the cost of caring for the critically ill and injured actually more than heart disease and cancer. And in fact, sepsis has been named the most expensive disease we take care of in hospitals now, okay? It's actually twice what it costs to take care of heart attack victims. Yet we hear all about heart attack victims. We don't hear much about the victim of sepsis. So all those sort of diverse entities I just talked to you about, whether it's the post-cardiac arrest victim, the burn victim, traumatic brain injury, sepsis, they share a lot in common. There is an enormous amount of commonality, just like there is across cancer care, that we as scientists and clinicians leverage to develop the next generation of therapies. Unfortunately, we have not done that like we should have in the realm of critical illness and injury. Also, we face this additional challenges that the time we have to make a difference and to save folks is really compressed. So as opposed to cancer biology, where cancers develop over months to years, the challenge we face with the critically ill and injured is somewhat of a time crunch. So from the scene of an accident to the emergency department, to the operating room, to the ICU, lots of things can go wrong, and that system is not really well connected. So we'll talk about data and how data connects all those systems. So you're only as strong as your weakest link in this regard. And of course, our final goal is total reanimation of that patient. But if we fail at any one of those levels for whatever reason, you don't stand the best chance of surviving that illness or injury. So I've been doing this for over 20 years, practicing emergency medicine, critical care, and I can tell you there are no game changers since I first began. And that should not comfort you at all, okay? So if you're in a bad accident or you get an overwhelming infection and you go to the emergency department, our ability to save your life is no greater now than it was 20 years ago. In fact, we're hampered by things like these antibiotic-resistant organisms. It's a real challenge. And part of that, how many people are engineers or computer scientists in the room? Lots of them? Okay, so here's the dilemma. You know that systems are not linear, okay? We're just finding that out in medicine. So medicine, we continue to want to practice in a linear manner, okay? If responses were linear, all we would need would be blood pressure and heart rate. But what happens for each individual here, if you're all experience the same insult, your responses will be different. So unfortunately in medicine, you have an injury, you've got this complex nonlinear response, and you have an outcome. And what we have a bad habit of doing in medicine is drawing a box around there and creating a cookbook recipe that's supposed to take care of everybody. And that's not the way it should be. And so in the realm of big data, we need a different way to manage this challenge. So the current path is hopeless if we continue on it. The new path is medicine, partnering with engineering, partnering with information sciences, and partnering with industry at the earliest possible times to give us hope. So that's one thing we're doing at Michigan. We've developed a new center called the Michigan Center for Integrative Research and Critical Care, and this vision is to restore lives of the critically ill and injured through integrated science, all right? And so that integrated science is bringing together engineers, information scientists, and strategic industry partnerships at the earliest possible time so that we can develop these solutions that are precise, predictive, proactive, and prescriptive, and personalized. And so the way we're doing this, so there are over 10 specialties that practice critical care. In our hospital alone, we have 11 critical care units that take care of all those varieties of critical care patients. And so getting all of those specialties sort of de-siloed and talking to each other bringing in those enabling disciplines like engineering and information sciences, and most importantly, at the earliest possible time, integrating strategic partners like AirStrip and IBM, which we're going to talk about in a minute, so that we can create that next generation of therapeutics, digital health devices, and therapeutics that recognize those challenges and those economies of scale in the critically ill and injured. So this is one of my favorite slides. These look like two diverse individuals that have nothing in common. You've got a 500-gram preemie that you can hold in the palm of your hand that's on a ventilator. You've got this freshly wounded soldier on the slopes of Afghanistan. And people ask, what do they have in common? They have everything in common. Both of those individuals are at risk for brain injury, for pain, lung injury, overwhelming infection that will affect them perhaps for the rest of their lives if they're lucky enough to survive those injuries. By the same token, the caretakers face similar challenges. So imagine taking care of that little bitty bit of real estate in the palm of your hand where if you just took 1 milliliter, 1 cc of blood from that baby, you would have to give it a blood transfusion, okay? All those alarms. You think about that combat medic who's got to take care of not only that soldier, but maybe 3 or 4 other wounded individuals, and all he has to use is in that backpack. And if he makes the wrong choices and uses up his supplies, someone might not live. Now, both of these are big data challenges, okay? So part of it is trying to get that data. The other part is knowing what to do with it. So here's our predicament in critical illness and injury, taming the ICU, the data beast. There is no bigger big data challenge in medicine than critical care, all right? Over 200 variables coming at you at one time, and we know through cognitive science that clinicians are only capable of processing maybe 1, 2, or 3 at a time. So when you look at all the data streams at high frequency, perhaps as high as 100,000 data points per second coming from an individual. We cannot humanly process that. So, my challenge in practice is I'm not just taking care of that one individual at one time. I'm trying to manage maybe 10 or 20 at one time with that amount of density. So here's the deal. I don't need technology to tell me that each of you are probably not, no one's going to drop dead right now. Probably a pretty good chance you're all fairly healthy right now. By the same token, if I have someone laying on the ground in a pool of blood that's pale with a blood pressure of 50 and a heart rate of 200, I don't need big technology to tell me that that person's ill either, okay? Well, the problem is everything in between. Since we all have this variability in response, it's difficult to know what trajectory you're on when you get sick. And that's where the money is, and that's where the hope of big data is. So in order to solve this problem, there is no one strategic partner out there that has a solution. There's no one academic medical center. There's no one sensing company. There's no one big data analytic company. There's no one big data aggregator company. Okay, no one has that solution. The solution is bringing in those strategic partnerships around academic medicine to make this work. So our partnership with IBM and AirStrip is really exciting. So we're going to land a big data analytic platform at the University of Michigan Health System that's capable of ingesting structured and unstructured data. So it could be all those biosignals coming from the monitor, could even be social media, images, laboratory data. If you want to add the omics there, we can do that. We're going to land it and we're going to analyze it in real time so we can understand simultaneously what's going on, why it happened, how it could be prevented, and simultaneously do product development. So one of the important aspects of this is the streaming technology that Alan talked about. So that, again, we can learn and almost do cognitive computing at the same time in an iterative manner very rapidly. So then at the end of the day, we get to realize that economy of scale. So we have a highly instrumented test bed in the intensive care unit, but those things we learn can be scaled out. So again, we want to understand the causes, the diagnosis, the outcomes, not just in the ICU, but before in the emergency department, in the ambulance setting, and then forward during recovery at home, whether it's a skilled nursing environment, assisted living, or in the home. So in the end, what we'd like to see is artificial intelligence streaming all those data points all at one time with advanced algorithms and artificial intelligence running in the background, telling me who's going to be sick or decompensate hours, perhaps days before it happens, so that we can intervene. That would be really exciting. You've all heard about alarm fatigue in the ICU. We have alarms going off. You know, all that's predicated on the fact that we think that what we're monitoring is what we should be monitoring. I'm going to venture to guess that after this project gets started, we're going to say, hey, half of the things we're monitoring were totally useless. We need to re-engineer this. And then again, we want this to scale out to the home. So using the ICU as a test bed, really understanding how sensors work, why they work, how physiologically linked they are, using that data and that data streaming and those analytics. And then perhaps it might be possible to do ICU quality monitoring in your home with the lowest common denominator of sensors. So I talk to Alan all the time. I said, it seems like all roads lead to lead through AirStrip. Because we don't want to waste time about dealing with the various vendors. We really, you know, data is data. We have to get it, we have to aggregate it, we have to stream it. And again, that challenge of taking care of those critically ill and injured patients where minutes, even seconds sometimes counts, you are going to have streaming technologies that allow you to apply these algorithms in the background because of our inability to process these things. So, you know, where does critical care live? I'm at the University of Michigan. I'm at the Ivory Tower. You know, we are not resource poor. We've got lots of training programs, so we're down there in the end. But the final solution, listen, the majority of critically ill and injured patients don't come to the Ivory Towers, okay? They don't go to the Stanfords or the Michigans or the UCSFs. They go to the community hospitals. So this is what's really excited about having AirStrip as a partner, is that the advanced analytics that we develop can be distributed through streaming technologies to community hospitals where they are really resource challenged. So in the end, when we bring engineers and information scientists into our shop, and they look to see what we've done in the House of Medicine over the last 100 years, they say, you are crazy. We would have never designed the system the way that you've designed it. But guess what? We're stuck with it right now. So I think the hope of big data and the hope of strategic partnerships working with academic medicine are going to allow us to re-engineer our approach. And so the face of critical care, which you see here, we hope will change drastically based on these alignments and these strategic partnerships, so that we do stand a chance. We can have those great breakthroughs that we so sorely need to help people realize the full potential of their lives. So with that, I want to thank you for the opportunity to address you.
So any questions?
So again, I think where we start from is making no assumptions, okay? So the hope of big data is that it's going to drive hypotheses, it's going to drive decision making. But in order to find those really valuable needles in the haystack that are going to make a difference, you've got to have the whole haystack. So you're going to have to invest in combinations of software and hardware infrastructure for big data analytics that are capable of ingesting all that data very rapidly. So algorithm development, you know, can be time consuming. So, you know, the big thing now is to use signal processing and machine learning to do advanced pattern recognition. So basically, you know, we need to create the Pandora version of critical illness and injury that does this pattern matching to ground truth. All right, so I would just say the approach is really more foundational. We're going to have to land this data and see what it means. And again, I'm not going to be surprised at the end of the day that we find out that, heck, half of the stuff we've been monitoring and paying attention to is not even important anymore. Once we do that, then the randomized trials certainly need to begin. But I will tell you, even in that regard, having a partner like AirStrip, so realize if you want to take what we do in Michigan and then exploit that and do a randomized clinical trial, you will have to have streaming capabilities. So this is the big hope, is really hampered by some of these practical questions about how do you get out into the trenches and prove this in other systems. And it won't be able to be done without an agnostic mobile data aggregator.
how do you imagine home health care and the information that comes through? Because it's much more intermittent. You've got all kinds of data connection problems. So I guess I'm sort of failing to catch the logical leap there.
Yeah, so again, I would start, I think it's wise to start in the critical care unit, okay? It's a controlled environment, it's highly instrumented. So this is the problem I have with sensor technology right now, is that there are lots of claims about what these things make, but they're not particularly linked to deep physiology, and that's a problem. So while we think right now that the home environment can't be intensively monitored, I think coming down the line with cable in your house and motion sensors, and with the right combination of sensors that are really vetted well in a high-intensity environment like the ICU, that there is a great chance that 5-10 years from now, every home can virtually be an ICU. The challenge won't be monitoring. The challenge will be what sort of therapies you can institute in the home to go along with those monitoring indices.
Yeah, and the comment that I would like to make, agreeing with starting in the ICU, if you look at the way we evolved at AirStrip, we started looking at waveforms, and we were providing remote access to that. But the doctors basically started telling us, I would like contextual data. So I'm not just looking at the waveforms, but I'm looking at the latest lab results. I'm looking at what the nurses are charting. I'm looking at what meds the patient is on. And we started learning all that in the ICU in obstetrics. And now as we move outside of the hospital, people are taking the approach of monitoring the person rather than the patient. And everybody started with the activity monitors, thinking that that is the way to start monitoring people outside of the hospital. But the reality is you have to go back to the chronic conditions. You have to go back to diabetic patients. You have to go back to patients with heart failure. And you need to monitor those sensors you need to display those sensors that are bringing the data and look at the contextual data as we did in the ICU. Everything that is connected to the monitors that are specific to a chronic disease or a clinical condition.
I'll just add to that real quickly. So in this world of big data, especially if you can get it in real time, everything becomes a feature. So your sex, your age, are you postmenopausal, what your comorbidities are, those are actually signals that are as important as the biologic signals coming off your body. So even when we look at sleep, if we can get a really good sleep algorithm, our intention is to use sleep as a vital sign, for example. So all of that has to come together, but you can think about what it would cost computationally to do iterative algorithm development. It would be cost and it would just be totally prohibitive without the right strategic partners.